Cool. All right, mate. Well, thanks for joining me. So I want to start talking about, obviously, we're both Liverpool fans. Not both Scousers, both Liverpool fans. So I want to start talking about, obviously, the current situation in terms of football and where Liverpool stand at the moment. I presume you watched the derby the other night.
I did, yeah.
Pretty awful game, wasn't it?
Drab affair.
So, I mean, how do you feel about the fact that, everything was halted halfway through the season? This 30 years wait for the title. Do you feel like it will be tainted at all?
No.
Do you feel no?
No, not in the slightest. I think because I'm a little bit older than you, I have obviously seen Liverpool win numerous titles.
Yeah.
So the 30-year wait didn't really have the weight that I think it had for a lot of people of your age and younger.
Yeah.
Where you've seen quite a sort of, not mediocre Liverpool, but a Liverpool that was never, ever competing at the very, very top.
No. I mean, I can't remember. So I was born in 1985. I can't remember Liverpool winning the league, really. When was the last time we won it? What,
90?
Yeah, 1990. So, yeah, so... So, and then obviously, when I was growing up, when you're young, it was United dominating. So yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, having not seen that, obviously there's been a Champions Leagues, but so how does it? But does it feel not? Does it feel like a long time, or?
Yeah. I vividly remember us winning in 1990, and then I went to university in '93, and we just looked like an old team that had just not kept pace with everyone else. You had Blackburn, you had Leeds, you had United, all just looked younger, more dynamic, hungrier, good, top quality young players coming through. And we had no one at the time, really. Fowler was, sniffing around, but him aside, there was no one who was going to set the world on fire.
No, and so, obviously the situation we're in now, the behind closed doors. I mean, how have you found the restart? In terms of watching it, and again, how do you feel about the whole situation, really, in terms of where?
I think it's it feels a bit forced. I don't know what the true agenda behind it all is. I'm hoping there's some genuine efforts to make people happy. It's the national game. So many of us are invested in football as our way of life, or part of our way of life. I've watched a few of the games, and they've just been, just distinctly average. City look a way better than everyone else. I know it's Liverpool's first game, but I thought we looked way behind City, to be honest with you, in terms of our performance.
I mean, I was I only had one eye on it, really, but Leicester Brighton's just finished 0-0. 0-0's happened, don't they? But it fairly there was a missed penalty and whatever, but fairly uneventful. The Liverpool, the derby was an awful watch. But again, those have happened. I suppose it's just in the context of the moment. I wonder whether the fact we are so far ahead, and obviously I'm not complaining about that, whether there's not an awful lot to play for.
Yeah.
But there is still top four to play for, and the games still do feel a bit damp. But I mean, I don't know. I'm glad it's back. The whole null and void thing obviously was, I mean, that would have been disastrous. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to play it out and win it. I mean, if we don't win it, then
it's going to happen. It's going to happen, Tom.
Yeah.
And it's I think the momentum and the enjoyment of winning the league has been taken away from us, because I vividly remember before lockdown, I was with all my mates in the pub watching, I can't remember which game it was. Anyway, and it was just that camaraderie, the energy. We all were bonded with the players and the manager. And we'd already planned. I'd spoken to my wife to book like 2 days off work, and So it was going to be, a real celebration of the 30-year wait and the league coming home.
Yeah.
And that celebration, we will not be able to have that celebration. I think that, to be honest with you, is the thing that has pissed me off the most.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, same. I was planning, because I was not living in Liverpool anymore, and I was planning to. We were looking at booking stuff and getting up there and everything, and it's going to be odd when it happens. I mean, it could happen this week still, couldn't it? Could happen tomorrow. Could happen tomorrow. No, not tomorrow.
Is City playing tonight or tomorrow?
No, they played last night.
Yeah, they annihilated
Burnley. Yeah,
Burnley, didn't they?
So but it could happen in the next couple of weeks, and it will be strange. I mean, I suppose being in Liverpool yourself, I mean, obviously today's announcement, the pubs are going to be able to reopen. I suppose by the time we win it, well, it depends on what we're on now. So I suppose the pubs might not be open when we do win it. I don't know. It was definitely going to be a strange one. I mean, for me, the achievement isn't any different. What the team's achieved. But I suppose that the lack of celebration will be frustrating. But I don't think all the sort of opposition fans are talking about it being tainted, and
no,
that for me is not the case at all. It's more a disappointment that we can't enjoy it as much as we would have done before.
I think if we were, say, 6 points ahead, there'd be arguments about it being tainted more, because they'll be able to say, oh, the other teams weren't putting the effort in and Liverpool only won it because of X, Y, and Z. But because I think we were so dramatically ahead of everyone else, it's just I think everyone who I know who's not a Liverpool fan was just essentially saying, just give them the trophy because they deserve it. And we do deserve it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, you're right, because I think there is an element of, it is a slightly different competition now, I think, in terms of home and away advantage, and whether or not the interruption in terms of fitness and that sort of thing. So the fact that it was sort of game over before this happened, I think validates it for us more. And I suppose there is a slight worry about, I think, watching the TV stuff. So I did see someone tweet a sort of a support of a lower league team, can't remember who it was. The Premier League team's not worried, or Premier League fans not worried about the fact that their team, they're completely unnecessary for that league to function. It's an interesting point when you think about it, isn't it? You see the fact that TV are doing the crowd noise, and they've got fans on screens now and stuff, and you wonder if there's a slightly dystopian sort of, what's the word? If it's slightly look into the future, whether or not TV will dominate to the point where, fans are. I mean, they're already seen as, not an annoyance, but as much as people talk about the atmosphere and how important the fans are being in the ground, I don't know. For me, there's just a little thing in the back of my head, which is a worry, I think.
It's not football from about 10, maybe longer years ago. It's not the working man's game anymore, because working men, or women for that matter, can't afford to go home and away. Because, I mean, I had a season ticket, and the year that we lost the league, I gave up my season ticket because I had grand. It's about just short of 900 quid.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't afford it. We just couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So everyone else, and I was on a decent salary.
Yeah.
Everyone else who are on, working class salaries just can't afford to go to the game. So, and that dynamic has changed, and people, the crowd's being all sat down. Everything else plays into that. So it's a very, very different game atmosphere. Because people talk about, if you remember, the great games of Liverpool Football Club, and the Barcelona, 4-0.
Yeah.
And You know, when we came back against Dortmund, you know, the list goes on, but the list is all very recent.
Yeah.
I remember beating United 2-1 at Anfield.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best games for atmosphere because we were all standing up and it was just insane.
Yeah, I mean, I again, because we've referenced that, obviously I'm a bit younger and I haven't got quite the same. But even now, looking back at the Rafa era, I mean, obviously the Chelsea semi-final I was at, and that's always. I mean, I don't think for me, it might have been the perfect storm of where we were at that time, but I wasn't at the Barcelona game. I think even if I had have been, I'm not sure I'll ever experience an atmosphere like I did at the Chelsea semi-final. And yeah, I mean, it's difficult because having moved away, I wasn't at Dortmund, I wasn't at Barcelona. I've been at some great games and some good atmospheres, but it's definitely, and I think it's changed even more. I mean, obviously you've been to a few games. I mean, not recently, but I mean, I think it's probably changed even more in the last 5 to 10.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, again, because people were moaning about it even in the noughties or whatever, and like I said, that Rafa era, but that now feels like a better time, I suppose, from an atmosphere and a more authenticity point of view, I suppose.
I think Klopp's made a big difference to the atmosphere in the ground.
Yeah,
his persona and the way his team plays. But one of my favourite games was when we beat Roma when Houllier came back.
Yeah,
and that I don't think for atmosphere that could have been beaten because it was the euphoria of a manager who you thought was dead coming back from the dead, and then us beating Roma, who were a great side at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
it was insane. I remember I was in the main stand and was dragged 3 rows down by just fans who I didn't know because we were all just going bonkers.
Yeah. No, I was there as well, and I remember because I liked Houllier a lot, and I'm not sure anyone even knew. There were some whispers, but
no one knew he was coming back
until he came out of the tunnel. I mean, it really was an incredible moment, and I remember that as being one of the best atmospheres, and that was also when that team, because I think we weren't expected to beat Roma. I remember away, it's an incredible result, and that was when that team were just. I mean, that was the treble season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It
was a very bizarre team. I mean, we had Littmanen play. Littmanen scored, didn't he?
I mean, I can't even remember what happened apart from the
Littmanen and Heskey it was.
Bloody hell. Yeah. Again, I've got good. I mean, I suppose it's a nostalgia thing. I've got good memories of that period, and even I suppose because I'm not going to the games as much as I love Klopp and the team now and everything about it. There's that time when you're a bit younger and you go in every week and and you look back at stuff with good memories. I mean, I suppose so. You have been to some more. You've been. Have you been this? Did you have any more tickets this season?
I've been on your tickets and a few other ones this year.
So I mean, thinking about it now, how do you feel about when you've been this season compared to say 10 and then compared to 20 years before?
I think your age makes a difference in it's not life or death for me anymore.
No.
And it used to be 20 years ago. I remember us going to Old Trafford in the Cup and getting beaten 2-1 and coming home and going to bed and it was about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I just didn't want to talk to anyone. For about a week, I was so upset. And it was life or death for me, Liverpool then.
Yeah.
Fast forward 10 years, and it was more of a social thing. I love going. I remember the Torres time was a fantastic memory for me.
Yeah.
I remember skipping to Anfield knowing that I'd see Torres, just simply because him and Gerrard at the time, that partnership was just, it just was so exciting.
Yeah.
And then you go 10 years further forward and I've got the kids and I'm going to the game and it's sort of squeezing the game around life, really.
Yeah.
And I'll enjoy it. A bit of social time with my brother usually. But we went to, I can't remember which game we went to this season, and we won. I think it might have been Leicester at home. And it was good, but you were surrounded by tourists, Scousers, a real sort of odd mix of people. Where when I used to stand on the Kop, you were surrounded by people from Liverpool. Well, virtually 99% were Scousers. So you had that sort of real tribal feeling that I just don't have, and I've never had since.
No, I mean, obviously, I'm not a Scouser, but obviously spent time, lived in, went to university and lived there, and I mean, even now, it's funny because people will be probably listening to this and thinking how ungrateful it sounds to be going to games and not enjoy them or whatever. But once I moved away, I still loved going up to the game, but often it was almost within a day or whatever. And also in some ways, the actual game itself, and this will sound crazy, but it's true. I think a lot of people relate to this. The 90 minutes itself is almost. It used to be. It's a tiny part of the day, really. I mean, I remember when I lived in Liverpool, I used to love derby days, and I'm not a Scouser, but the feeling in a city, and it's a whole day. You get up, literally, you go and have breakfast with your mates, and you go to the pub, and then it was the 90 minutes fit was part of a whole day. Whereas when I
think you've hit the nail on the head. It was exactly that. The game wasn't inconsequential, but the game was part and parcel of a real event. So you get up in the morning, breakfast. All the pubs that were around Anfield. I drank in the Grove for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's sort of on its arse now. And I'd meet my mates there, and we had the same traditions, and we all did the same. We went to the same chippy and pubs, and it was an event. And it used to be, of course, it used to be 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. So it was regular. Once every fortnight at 3 o'clock, you're going to the game, and it's just completely changed.
Yeah. I mean, it is a shame, and I suppose now you wonder when that will come back, and if it will come back in the same way. But I suppose it's getting slightly pessimistic. So I mean, let's go back then and talk about your younger days supporting Liverpool. So obviously you are from Liverpool. Did you grow up? Where did you grow up? You grew up in.
I grew up in Allerton, but I was sent randomly to school in Everton.
Oh, right.
In Scotty Road at a school called Campion. So I had we used to go cross country running up past Anfield, right. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of close friends who lived in and around the ground. So despite the fact that I lived in South Liverpool, a lot of my time was spent in and around Anfield.
Yeah.
And I started going to the game when I was quite young, and I was about 14. And I used to get the 86 up and then the bus across from Upper Parliament Street, or the 61. And I'd meet my mates from school. And it was just a sort of, I was excited, frightened because I was a kid, and the physicality of it all, because you were so little. Yeah. And you were being buffeted around, and you had to stand on the Kop in a certain place. As you sort of gained your seniority, all the kids stood on one side, or the other, and we all stood on the left. And so we wouldn't get squashed. So we stood on the left behind a crash barrier, because when Liverpool scored, it'd just go off. Yeah. And then as we got older, about 16, 17, we moved into the middle, where you've seen it on the telly, where it was all just swaying around, and it was just immense. And I vividly remember the first time I went, and the pitch seemed enormous. I remember walking up the steps and just looking down onto the pitch and thinking, that is so green and so big.
It's funny because actually, I suppose, because you wouldn't have seen, I mean, how often did you see it on television? Much at that point?
No.
Because
once in a blue moon, you'd see it on the telly.
Because that's the funny thing. I remember thinking, having seen it on TV and grown up, that I remember when I'll never forget first seeing the pitch. but it seems smaller because that's what you know, the perspective on TV is. It's almost the opposite feeling to what you would have had seeing it. And was it just so it was just that completely natural thing you hear so many people talk about, being that certain age with your mates from school, and that's what you do. You just go and watch. You go and watch Liverpool, you go and watch your team on Saturday.
You wouldn't. There'd be very, very rarely where it would be a sellout. I remember in my late teens, me and my mate had been on the ale, and we'd woken up in his house, and we were watching Football Focus at midday, and we were hungover to death. And he said, "Should we go to the game?" And we were playing. We were playing, I think, Villa, because it was Carragher's debut goal.
Yeah.
At home, and we just got a taxi to Anfield, queued up, and got in.
Yeah, and that's interesting because that's not it's not that long ago, really. I mean, maybe I'm, but you know, and obviously, you know, I remember Carragher coming through, and I actually still just about remember queuing for tickets and stuff for European games and that kind of thing. I say it's not long ago. I suppose it is still probably 20 years, but I mean, I didn't have that growing up. That's what I've always thought I missed, really, is that locality thing of being, like, all your mates just being, not necessarily all supporting the same team, but you being close enough to just grow up supporting a team and go to the ground, you know. Which I think it's different experiences, but I've always felt like I slightly missed out from that perspective. And so
my mate his mum lived 2 roads up from the Kop. So we used to come out of the Kop and just go to his house and have like sandwiches and chips and lemonade after the game. And it was just that romantic. It's completely romantic. I just remember it all to just be just lovely. And we never. And the funny thing is, Tom, we never lost. I don't remember at that age going to the game and us losing. I honestly don't remember us losing.
So when was the first games you would have gone to?
I would have been going 85, 84, 85 season. And it was just that you just went to the game to see Liverpool beat whoever was put in front of them.
Yeah. Well, people talk about that sort of side is what they talk about as being almost the best, isn't it? That kind of late age, even though they're out of Europe.
The later, this was pre that side. This was Souness and you know, Souness and Kenny, and then you moved into like the Paul Walshes and the McMahons, and that was pre the Barnes, Houghton.
So that was what, 88 sort of.
Yeah, the 88 team.
Yeah. And then, so in terms of obviously the sort of the casual thing and the clothes thing, people talk about that now, and Liverpool, being born out of Liverpool, Manchester, obviously some clubs in London sort of wrongly probably think that they started there. But how aware were you of anything? Were you aware of there being any kind of scene developing, or whatever you might call it, subculture, whatever you want to call it now? Or was it just, do you think that's something that's been kind of looked back on and talked about, and it was just, like I say, we didn't have any awareness of it, really? Or
yeah, it came from the elder lads in school who'd gone away to Europe with Liverpool. I remember being in school, and I had mates around Liverpool as well, and you just obviously were aware of these different kinds of trainers that were coming back, and Adidas predominantly, Lendl Comp were an absolute belting pair of trainers. Adidas shoes. And my dad was a teacher, and he was taking a load of kids that time away to Rome on a school trip. And of course, they just went through Rome like a dose of salts.
Yeah.
And I'd said to my dad, whatever happens, you have to bring me an Australian Alpina trackie back. And he brought me and my brother these Alpina trackies back, which were just the greatest thing we'd ever seen in our lives.
Yeah.
And it was school, it was the game, it was your mates, and it was all just the perfect not the perfect storm, but it all just meshed together. I mean, I've spoken to you about this before, but I think you don't realise how much you're scratching the surface, because there were about 7 or 8 different types of jeans. There were about 8 or 9 different types of shoes, trainers, cagoules, trackies, hats. It was just so diverse, and then it got more and more and more, and it started like with Adidas, then we had Tashini and Ales. And do you ever remember Olympus Sports? It was like a sports shop. Olympus Sports, hoodies, and Patrick Cagoules. It was just so diverse. And I tell you what, Tom, it changed all the time. So it was changing 6 months a year, 6 months a year.
That's what I find kind of interesting about it, because the casual thing now and the way it's talked about, and I mean, obviously my blog is called The Gentleman Casual, but it's a strange one, because I think now, you're talking about the diversity and there's some of those brands there, and now I think what's seen as this casual scene is almost just a kind of throwback sort of. It's not current, is it really? I mean, there's basically now, and Adidas is still a big thing in some ways. I mean, Liverpool itself as a city, I think the young lads now in Liverpool have pretty much rejected Adidas, haven't they? Really?
Yeah, Adidas is purely the elder statesman of Liverpool now. Liverpool's all about your Nike. And then all the mountain wear from North Face, Patagonia, which it really annoys me, because I was wearing Patagonia 20 years ago, and the price has just gone up astronomically to the point where I can't even afford it anymore.
That's the thing, because around the country now, it's Adidas, it's Stone Island, and all that, and it's all gone a bit. It's just, I don't know.
I mean, Carhartt now is insane, because it cost buttons, Carhartt, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Buttons, and now you can't pick a t-shirt up for less than 30 quid.
No. Well, I think that's the other interesting thing. I think back, even when it was happening when you were younger, it wasn't necessarily all about cost though either, was it? Because I mean, things like Patrick Cagoules, Peter Storm, I think even was
Peter Storm was bizarrely a little bit before, with the green sort of, everyone had the green cagoule on. There was in away days, the Tranmere film. But it wasn't about cost. You know what it was about? It was about being different.
Yeah.
Different haircuts, different t-shirts, and I remember I found a Tashini polo neck that had a Tashini brand there, and everyone was like, "Whoa, where'd you get that from?" And it was, if you could just find a little nugget that was different, it was great. And I tell you another one that people forget about, and you see it. Everyone went mad for about 2 years for ski jackets.
Right.
Everyone had ski jackets on. Yeah. No one went skiing, but everyone had ski. To go to the mats, everyone had ski jackets on.
That's the thing now, though, isn't it? Like I say, it's the whole sort of casual thing that's developed now, and you've got websites and Twitter accounts, and it's become a sort of uniform, that's completely the opposite of what it was about, wasn't it? It was about being different, finding something unusual or that you liked as well. And I mean, there's people probably wearing stuff because it's what they think they need to wear, certain brands. It wasn't, I mean, obviously it was about brands, but it wasn't. And I think, I mean, Liverpool, they have, and that's still what's happening now. You're not necessarily calling it the casual thing, but like you say, the younger lads. I mean, I remember going back to the sort of the noughties years. I mean, I don't know if you remember, really, there was that period where all Scousers were wearing Barbour jackets.
Yeah.
No one has seen Barbour. I wasn't even particularly wearing Barbour jackets at that point. And you look back at that now and think, oh Christ, but now Barbour jackets are all over the place, and it's gone back to being the kind of countryside thing. But yeah, there was it was still Adidas trainers, but the padded Barbour jackets, and then now obviously it's the Nike, it's the 110s, whatever they call them, and all the mountain gear and D squared. And I mean, it's probably is still a bit about, it's gone a bit still away where it is about cost. I think now a lot of the stuff everyone's wearing, including Scousers, tends to be pretty expensive. But that, they're not. They started wearing that kind of stuff a couple of years ago, probably, and already you're seeing some of those Nike trainers coming in around the country, the mountain gear coming in around the country. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not long before the young Scouse lads change again. And I mean, who knows what it would be next? But I've got I love Liverpool, and I mean, I'm not just sort of saying it, but I genuinely think that Liverpool, well, not just lads, but the girls as well, but they are at the forefront, I think, of, because that's what they all want to be different, don't they? That's what it's about, and not dress like.
A mate of mine, a girl who works for me, she said, "You're a typical Scouser because you all wear your money on your back." And by that, like, if we have like a dress down Friday in work, I would wear, head to toe, Carhartt jeans, Adidas trainers, Lacoste t-shirt, and Lacoste as well. Lacoste has stood the test of time. Adidas and Lacoste are probably the two brands that have stood the test of time.
Yeah.
The Lacoste polo shirts came in, then it went Lacoste trackies, but Lacoste polo shirts are viewed as the timeless piece of fashion kit that will never ever. You always look great in a Lacoste t-shirt, polo shirt, and Fred Perry as well has come back massively again now.
Yeah,
not so much in Liverpool, but it's a huge national brand.
Yeah, I think Fred Perry's probably. You do see it in Liverpool a bit. I think it's one of those that just has continued to kind of keep a steady path through. It's interesting with the Adidas thing. I almost exclusively buy Adidas trainers, and they still make some great trainers being released by Adidas. But again, it's almost getting so saturated, and these new releases or these sort of exclusive releases, and the Special range, is doing some good stuff, but that's now starting to get a bit. People are getting tired of it, and it's almost going over subscribed. I suppose it's like anything. As soon as stuff becomes too popular, whether it's a band or whatever, people start to try and switch off, or those that want to be at the forefront feel like they're starting to switch off and move on to something else. I mean, there's some other really good trainer brands out there. I mean, Kahu, I think, is it, and sort of Sony's are nice, and you can
have a look around. I love retro pieces. I had a Buckter black tracksuit top that I had for years that was just a great piece, and I just like buying now, and I'm 50 now, but I still like buying just bits and bobs and hunting like on eBay or charity shops. Like, I had a Carhartt t-shirt on yesterday that I paid $5 for in a charity shop.
Yeah.
And I found a pair of Timberland boots, immaculate, in a charity shop. So I find it's just the thrill of going to like TK Maxx and finding like a random Paul Smith shirt, or just something that no one else has. And it's that kind of finding different pieces rather than the uniform.
Exactly, and I think that, to me, that is really what the essence of the whole casual thing is about. I think that is what's probably got a bit lost recently. I mean, not exclusively, but yeah, I think now there is, there's certainly these brands that get associated with it, which some of them I like a lot. I've got a CP company coat, which I love it, wear it all the time. But the Stone Island, the CP, the Adidas trainers, it's just become a sort of, you see these pictures of sort of young lads around the country now at football, and they just all look the same, which is not really where the essence of it, came from. But I guess that's just what happens to these things. And also, I don't expect at the time, I don't suppose anyone really saw it as anything other than it wasn't labelled anything, was it? Presumably when it was happening.
No, totally not labelled. It was trend. It was basically, and it was fashion.
Yeah.
You were following fashion, and it was exciting because you'd see someone with the next pair of I remember seeing someone with trim trap on and just thinking, "Oh my God, I've got to have a pair of that."
Yeah. And I guess that is what's still happening now, particularly in Liverpool. I suppose it's just it's the people that are trying to follow the kind of what's seen as the casual, identity, almost paint by numbers is where it's become a bit tied and it's gone a bit wrong, I think. Because that's what kids do. That's what young people do, isn't it? There are trends and they try and keep ahead of the curve, and you can definitely see that that's still happening in Liverpool.
But what you've got to remember is the world has changed as well. We had no internet. Nothing was advertised, so you only found out about things from sight or word of mouth.
Yeah.
So it was that transference. Whereas now, in one click, you can see and have whatever you want. So kids are just lazy now. There's no, with fashion, the so-called casuals who go to the game, they're all just lazy. They're not interested in. There's no hunt to find. You don't have to go to Europe to find a pair of trainers. I went to France. I was on holiday with my mum and dad, but I had gone to another country over 2 days in the back of a car with my main aim was to get a Lacoste hooded top, which I did.
Yeah.
And so you're just not going to have that level of dedication anymore, really.
No, it's very true. All right, mate. We'll move things on to a slightly different topic now. Because I just wanted to have a bit of a chat to you about. This is quite a sort of segue. A bit of a chat about mental health, particularly male mental health, because I know it's something that both of us are sort of. Well, I don't know how to put it. Close to our hearts, I suppose. And I know you in your career, in your professional capacity, you are quite vocal about it and write quite a lot about it in terms of your professional life. So I suppose to start with, I mean, there's a lot of talk now, isn't there, about male mental health, and the need for it to be talked about more, and which is obviously all very positive. Do you feel, again, sort of being slightly older than me, do you feel that we are making strides in that sort of area? And do you think a lot of the talk that is happening is helpful, in terms of some of the stuff? You've seen the Royals come out a lot. You've seen quite a lot of stuff in terms of football and campaigns and that kind of thing. Do you think we're going in the right direction?
Any talk, Tom, anything that is publicised about mental health in this country, in men, in anyone, but in men, is good.
Yeah.
Because it is still so stigmatized, and men still struggle to talk about their emotions, and see a conversation of that nature as the norm. Having a coach or a therapist or a counsellor is still massively alien to a load of people.
Yeah.
Like I've had coaches for near on 25 years now. I retain a coach now, therapist who I see once a quarter.
Yeah.
40 odd quid once a quarter. The best money you will ever spend, because you're getting an objective opinion on where you are at that stage in your life. And you could be at a great time in your life where you don't really need any help or guidance with your mental health, or you can be struggling, but it is just having that touch point where
that's
you find out where you are.
That's interesting, because a couple of times in the past I tried counselling, tried talking therapy, and then I also had an appointment about I can't remember what it's called. CBT?
Yeah, CBT, yeah.
And it didn't really, I sort of had one session, didn't really get anywhere. And then, my current girlfriend's American. When I met her, she has a weekly therapist call, you know, and her friends, you know, American friends, they've all got, it's not, they haven't all got therapists, but it's funny because I think week to week she has a call. It doesn't really matter what's going on.
Yeah.
She has the call, and she started when she was in America. She's now over here. She does it virtually. So I actually, you know, having talked to her about that, and then I did start to talk to a therapist on a more regular basis. And it's certainly, it's helpful. I think it is that thing also of realizing, like you said, it's not necessarily about I've got a problem in a bad place, I'll talk to a therapist. It's actually sometimes when you feel like you're fine, you don't need to talk to them.
I was moving after I'd been in the same job for 15 years. I was resigning my partnership and moving to a new challenge. So I wanted to understand where I needed to be in my head for this massive change in my life. So mentally, I was absolutely bob on. And it turned out that the new job was a phenomenal, you know, challenge. It was hard work, you know, massive stresses. So seeing the therapist and front loading the situation stood me in good stead. And with a therapist or a coach, it's not about talking to someone, it's finding the right fit for you. You can go and see someone and you'll think, oh, that was shit. Because I know loads of people who've been to see therapists who said, I went to see him once or her once, didn't like her, I binned it.
Yeah.
And it's about finding the right person and building a relationship. My current coach, I've seen on and off. I've had like gaps of a year or two I haven't seen him for the last 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
And I've advised tons of friends and colleagues to go and see him. He must owe me a fortune in royalties.
Yeah.
But it's just so, the thing is, Tom, it's so easy to do.
Yeah. That's the thing, I think, as I say, because I definitely had that one. I've had false starts, I suppose, or periods where I've just thought, well, you know, especially because I find, you know, although I talk quite openly about mental health and advocate it, you know, and everything, I'm still one of those people that found the idea of it a little bit difficult. Almost was more anxious about before having a session with a therapist than I felt about anything else in that week.
Yeah.
So it is, I suppose it is, and not like you say, exactly, it's nothing necessarily. I've had times where I've talked to someone, they were perfectly fine, but it probably is about making sure you get someone that you do, and maybe, you know, did you go through with different people, or?
Yeah, I tested. I saw a few people for a few times over the years when I was younger. Just didn't fit with me. Didn't see them again. And what you've got to remember with men as well, we're at a real tipping point culturally where women have, you know, in the legal profession, for example, there's more women lawyers than there are men. Women are present in all the boardrooms, as they should be. You've got the Me Too campaign. And you've got men in society where we've gone through a generational misogynistic persona in the 80s to where we are now. And I went to International Women's Day a few months ago in work. And the energy in the room was just insane. You know, the positivity, the conversations were great. I was invited to talk about women mentoring. And if you put men in the same situation, they'd just be lost. They'd just be lost.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. We've lost our identity to a degree. Men are hardwired as hunter-gatherers, but society has changed where to view men in that, through that lens, is viewed to be, you know, a little bit sexist perhaps now. So men in society are going through a transition at the moment where they are quite lost and are quite struggling with their emotions. And, you know, I mean, people say, I don't know if you remember in the 90s, people would say, are you in touch with your female side?
Yeah.
You're a man. You don't have a female side. You're a man. You know, it's pathetic. so there's that. There's this real sort of swing at the moment, this tipping point where I'm unsure as to which way it's going to go.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think it's interesting as well because, yeah, I think you're right. Men have probably got a bit of an identity crisis at the moment because I think in some ways they're feeling slightly under attack, you know, and you can see this coming out in some of the behaviour. And I think, and you can, you know, in some ways now it feels like things are going the other way where there's, and also this, I think this boils down to, you know, being a white man. You see it coming out in some of the behaviour in terms of what we're seeing in terms of racism and, you know, some of the you have to go on Twitter and some of the reaction of sort of white young men, or yes, or not young men, white men to kind of the Me Too movement or the Black Lives Matter movement is
well, the thing is, Tom, they're neither female. They're neither female or you know, black, brown. They're white. So you're a white man. You've got no concept of what it's like to be a woman. You've got no concept of what it's like to have brown skin. So, in my opinion, your opinion is, you know,
well, exactly
not worth the paper it's written on.
Exactly, and I think, and you know, it's so odd to think that they can't. And I think that there are lots. It's the sort of fragility of masculinity in many ways, where they now feel under threat. I think by the Me Too movement, or just, you know, what should just be equality. And I think that's one of the problems. But also, what's quite difficult, I think, is I don't see myself as a particularly masculine bloke, and that whole thing about your feminine side or being in touch with your feelings or whatever, and it's like anything, there's a spectrum, and I think you can be. I'm also, as much as I think you should talk about toxic masculinity. I also think there's nothing wrong with being masculine either. So I think if you go too far, so I think there's certain things that are seen as masculine that I don't enjoy, but vice versa. So I think you have to be careful with this conversation that I don't know. I'm trying to articulate it. There's nothing wrong with being. There's nothing wrong with being sort of a more feminine, however you want to put it, bloke. And there's nothing wrong with what's seen as being traditionally masculine. But I think it's those sort of traditional stereotypes which I suppose are the problem. I mean, even down to when people start talking about the metrosexual man, or it's an odd one, isn't it? How you can be.
It's just what you've got to remember is it's your classic labelling.
Yeah.
The society loves labelling things because it gives them something to talk about. If you go to the States, and you touched on it earlier, having a therapist and talking about your emotions. Tony Soprano is your cast iron example.
Yeah.
Is a societal norm that has been in place in America for 30 years. And it's still just trickling into this country. So we've got 30 years to catch up with, talking about your emotions as a man being the norm. And, fortunately, we've got, the royals and the internet that will probably hasten that conversation along. But in terms to get to a place where we look at yourself in the mirror as a whole and being, sad, upset, happy, excited, having a whole range of emotions and being settled and content with being a man who can display all of those emotions.
Yeah,
is where we need to be, and not labeling them as weak or feminine or not feeling the need to.
No, I mean, you're absolutely spot on there. I think you're completely right. And I suppose, I mean, I don't know what you think, again, in your professional capacity, how you feel about it. We're definitely making strides. I think my slight worry still is that the conversation is all fantastic and it should continue to happen. I still think we've got some way to go before people, you can have as many posters as you want up in the office. You can have as many mental health awareness weeks as you like and whatever. I still think it probably feels like it's difficult. I know I felt at times it's difficult to sit in front of your boss or your colleague or whoever, you know, and to think, well, will I really be understood if I talk about this, you know? And I think, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but I wonder whether there are still, you know, it's those ingrained, particularly at work, those ingrained sort of attitudes of,
because I talk to my staff about mental health, and they all know that I've been a support worker for 10 years, and I, you know, support lawyers who are struggling with mental health. They feel completely comfortable talking to me about mental health.
Yeah.
Because I understand it. I've struggled with it in my life. I support anyone who's going through mental health. So until you can't have a conversation with someone about mental health who isn't aware or understands the impact of mental health or the challenges of mental health issues. So I hear what you're saying about how can I sit with a boss? Because I've had bosses who I wouldn't talk to them about mental health because they are so emotionally crippled or unaware that they wouldn't know where to start. And I wouldn't put them in that position because it would embarrass them and it wouldn't benefit me in the slightest. So why even go there?
It is tough, I think, and I think it's not even because I've got a mate of mine who whether he really means this or he's being slightly sort of inflammatory, but he sort of he doesn't seem to have really struggled particularly in the part, you know, which is great. And he sort of said to me before, he doesn't really. I think he said he didn't really believe in depression, which again I think was probably being slightly inflammatory, but because he probably hasn't experienced anything particularly, which is you know, that's a good thing. But I suppose it's difficult, and you know, there's people that I think are sympathetic, but again, they might not necessarily, just because they haven't been through something, they don't really understand. So it's hard, and I'm not suggesting, I'm not blaming anyone or anything like that. It's interesting. I think, you know, it's important. I think for the mental health conversation, particularly in the work context, to happen, you know, for everyone, whether or not you've been through it, you haven't been through it. There's different levels of it, obviously, you know. And I think that's one of the most difficult things, isn't it? There are people that are
people who say they have never struggled with mental health in any capacity are lying.
Yeah,
because they're not owning their own emotions.
Yeah.
In terms of, and they're not acknowledging fear, sadness, anxiety, anger, all of these emotions that they would perceive to be wrong or weak. And until you accept emotions that you would perhaps previously have viewed as negative or wrong, you're never going to be able to be your true self.
Yeah. It's absolutely spot on. I feel like we've probably come to quite a good conclusion there, Nick. That's very articulate, very well put. Yeah. Okay, good stuff. All right, well, so what are you going back to the football? What do you think you will do when Liverpool do win the league? What will be how will you celebrate?
I will go and have a socially distanced celebration with my friends.
Yeah, good stuff.
At a location not to be disclosed. For fear of incriminating ourselves.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so important, and it's such an achievement that it needs to be celebrated properly. And you just think back to the team and how good they are and were in the season. We as supporters deserve to celebrate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, mate. Perhaps we'll try and have another chat. You know, once we have won the league. Really appreciate it.
Take care, mate.
See you, mate. Take it easy. Bye.
See you later.